interested.
You need to drink more.
I like the word dumbassery. I have adopted that word.
Dumbassery.
And then I added smartassery to the list of new words.
Hey, Tiny doesn't know it, but we're on the air.
Oh, no.
That's our
My new vocabulary.
our new beginning to the show.
Thank you for sharing, Tanya.
Here we go. We're going to actually start the show. Check it out.
All right.
That was called my impromptu beginning to the show. What do you think of
Somehow
that?
I suspected you were going to do that. I knew as soon as I started talking about it.
I gave Tanya a beer or a twisted tea or whatever it was, so she's all loose and ready to go for the evening.
Oh, come on now.
Yeah. Welcome, everybody, to the Annoying Peasant Radio Show. It's kind of a weird beginning, but weird is maybe normal, right? So what is weird? I don't know. Thanks for joining us anyway. We're going to have kind of a different discussion this evening. Tanya's got the mic boom and she's just struggling with that thing. What is it doing?
I don't know. I'm confused.
You just wiggle it around
I was
any way you want.
confused about the headphones. Now I'm trying to figure out the mic.
But they're working good, aren't they?
Just go on. Don't mind me.
No, I think this whole show we're just going to talk about
This
Tanya.
This is a come as you are show.
Yes.
I told Tom he had a lot of topics he wanted to talk about, and I said, don't send me anything until Tuesday. So that's where we're going to go with it. And I don't know how to work any of the technology either. So
how's the volume in your headset? You're okay?
Seems good.
Okay. Sweet.
I feel so tied down. I'm used to having the mic in my hand. That's my problem.
Oh, see, she's just struggling. See, actually,
I'm used to karaoke.
Yes, she's very big at karaoke, isn't she, Lucas? I hear. Anyway, we have a whole bunch of different things we're going to discuss. If Tanya gets over the mic boom issue.
Okay.
So far, this is the best show we've ever done. I don't know why we didn't do this from the start.
Now it's moving on its own. All right.
You'll get it. Anyway, I just want to start because I don't know. I guess I've been kind of in a weird mood here lately, but I wanted to start with a George Carlin quote because we were talking about this a little earlier, and I thought it works a little bit for us because we were talking about an upcoming episode we're going to do about education and what education is and all kinds of stuff. I don't want to steal the thunder from that show, but this one is governments don't want a population capable of critical thinking. They want obedient workers, people just smart enough to run the machines and just dumb enough to passively accept their situation.
Amen, brother.
Yeah, George Carlin. I'm like, hey, there's the education show right there, George Carlin. I had a conversation with a gentleman today, and he is, I guess, a self-described liberal Democrat, and apparently I'd never let him know that we had a radio show. And he says, what? You do a radio show? I said, well, not a terrestrial radio show, an online radio show. So anyway, you know how the political discussions go with people all the time when they tell you about, oh, yeah, the Republicans are on Hillary because of her email scandal. And, hey, is that all they got? That's nothing, And it's really a little tougher to relate to someone in which you're in a totally different paradigm. And so we kind of went round and round a little bit. But anyway, interesting conversation. Nice guy. So that was fun. But I think it helped exacerbate my mood is the point. Anyway.
We should probably mention who's here with us. And
sure.
I don't know who's going to be talking. Apparently everyone's here to make fun of me. But
Wait,
my husband, Lucas, is here. And Trigger is here. Although I guess he has a new nickname. I don't know.
Wait, here he is.
Shall I still call you Trigger?
Introduce yourself.
Yes, you can still call me Trigger.
Okay.
Wait, your real name, your new real name.
Jihadi Justin.
Does he want to claim that one?
Yes, we're with Jihadi Justin. Anyway.
And now the NSA has now taken a much greater interest in this show.
Yes, they'll be in the chat shortly. Anyway. So I did the George Carlin quote, and I also got another one that I think is apropos. I like his humor, and again, I was kind of in a weird mood. He says, never underestimate. Well, I should say he said, not says. since he's no longer with us. Never underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups.
I've heard that one before.
Yeah, I like that one. Anyway.
Very good.
So for those of you who have not listened to our show before, I mean, I get, like I was saying, maybe a weird beginning and stuff, but I think hopefully we'll have some enlightening discussion, a little different perspective than what you're used to. I try to start with a quote or something, and then I go into a little brief description of the show, what we're going to go into. So I'll do that. And I'm actually going to kind of do pretty much a repeat of last week, and just talk a little bit about what you're about to hear. And just to give you a little bit of backdrop, most hold that this show puts forth a radical political philosophy. This philosophy recognizes that we live in a world of economic scarcity. I seek social cooperation in order to avoid the conflicts that may arise from such a circumstance. Maybe that doesn't sound so radical to you yet, if I could speak. But hang on, there's more. Each person has an ownership right in him or herself, and therefore has the right to exercise sole dominion over his property. To most people, I think that sounds okay. But when you start applying it, they go, what do you mean? I can't take somebody else's stuff?
Everybody agrees with that on the surface.
Yes.
Until we start talking about the details.
Yes. Maybe it doesn't sound controversial, but I think to a lot of people that will be controversial to them. But here's the difference. I think I'll speak a little for Tanya here. She can diverge if she so chooses, that support that all people are actually equal in legal stature. Okay, and then again, that one sounds good on the surface, but think about that for a second. That no one or no group of individuals can violate the rights of another, regardless of the circumstance or time. It is, in fact, a crime to initiate violence or to perpetrate fraud against another. This is where the freedom philosophy rails against the common view. The overwhelming majority support such violations, and hopefully you're sitting there going, well, I don't, so I don't know what you're talking about. Let me describe to you a little bit how you do it. Through the state apparatus. Most support these violations with recognizing them as such, or support them as necessary to make things work. So I think you're kind of one of two camps. Hey, it's all right because the majority has spoken, or however they substantiate it, or they say what you're proposing just sounds great. It's a good political view, or it's a good philosophical view, but to actually make things work, you have to initiate violence against people to make them do what you want to do. I think that's where a lot of people are. And again, I don't think they really think about that, but that is what they're in fact doing.
I think everything you said, most people agree with, but they just have a huge exception, and that's the state.
Yes.
It's on a personal level, we can't do any of those things. But when it comes to, the government, when it comes to the state, that people will say, well, it's necessary. Either it's a necessary evil, or it's a good thing, or it's something that we have to do to make society work.
Yes.
And I think also that most people think of it as it's us doing it together. It's not one person or one group of people actually initiating violence against another person or group. It's just something that we collectively decided to do.
Right. So, and I totally agree with that. So all I can say is listen to the upcoming discussion, determine if such violations are indeed necessary and not mere rationalizations aimed at supporting a means to molding society in the image that you happen to desire. Right? So at most, we just want to get you to think. And if we get you there, that's a victory on our side. And to open a discussion is even more fun. So
I think if you're open-minded but not empty-minded, if you start the process,
yes.
For me, I personally was not able to stop that process once it began.
It was a snowball downhill.
It was. It just kept on going. So if you are sincerely open-minded and a thinking,
curious,
rational person, then, I think that maybe you'll start a process that might open up some new doors for you.
Absolutely. One thing that I guess, a little in summary, I got 3 sentences here. The initiation of violence against an innocent person should not be legalized. Right?
Okay.
If you think about that. And it is it is unjust to violate another's property right. Plain and simple. It does not matter whether you won a popularity contest, wear a nice costume, or even if you work in a factory. It doesn't matter, right? You should not, or it is unjust to violate someone's property right. So property rights belong to each of us and just simply must not be violated. So that's, one way of looking at what this show is about.
But when we say that that it is unjust to initiate violence, that does not necessitate pacifism.
Correct.
Some people who hold to this philosophy are pacifists, some are not.
Right.
Self-defense would be justifiable.
I would say is the
if
only
you own yourself or your property.
Yes.
Then self-defense would be
and that
acceptable.
I would argue that's the only circumstance in which the use of violence is justified.
Right. And pacifism is okay, too. It's just up to you.
Absolutely. Uh-oh.
What you want to do.
Lucas has a comment. Break in, Lucas.
Yeah.
He ran away. We had him with a
know.
comment.
I'm still hoping that
we'll get him
he'll
on
talk
the
to
air.
us, other than mumbling little comments in our ear that the listeners cannot hear.
Kind of the two critic old guys on the Muppet Show up in the balcony.
Yeah. What are their names?
I don't.
Did they have names?
I don't even know. They were good though.
Yeah.
They were very good. What was I going to say? I had something that tipped my tongue and I forgot. Just hang on, listen to the discussion, and as I encourage most people, you actually can't get really what we're talking about even in one entire show, even if we do go 90 minutes or more.
We're not going to do that.
No. But, I liken it to someone, usually I think more people, if you have this view, maybe I could just generalize a radical view. People tend to come up to me, well, basically, prove it to me. Show me how this was worked. Tell me, describe it to me. It's kind of, they put the ball in my court to try, put the burden on me to describe it, right? And I think it's a little like saying, hey, teach me theoretical physics. And if it takes you more if it takes you more than 5 minutes, see, then you're just not doing a good job.
It's just not even practical.
Yeah, it can't work because it sounds really complicated. And, if someone just said, describe the free market, well, obviously we could make a couple broad statements to try to give an overall description. But if they really said, explain how it works day to day in this entire country, what is actually happening? Well, see, this dude is driving a truck, is bringing wood to a place, and that place is fixing the truck sometime, filling it with fuel, pencils. What are you showing me?
Trigger has
Statler
notes.
and Waldort?
That's their names? Did
Dorf?
you just look it up? Oh,
wow.
You're awesome.
We got a researcher here today with us. I was like, what?
Statler and Waldorf, that's those guys' names?
Yeah,
on the Muppets in the balcony?
Yeah.
Thanks, Trigger.
See, we gotta have Jihadi Justin with us every week, being our researcher.
I learned something tonight.
There you go. But so the point is, if they don't actually recognize that they're asking you such a huge question, and then they basically, I argue, make it a cop-out that you can't explain it to me in 30 seconds, so it's just overly complex and it will never work.
Well, and I always like to ask the question, too, if people are defending the state, explain to me how the state is working and bringing justice and bringing all of this peace and protection and everything that you want it to bring, because most people have a lot of ways that they think that things are still unjust, and so the system that they're defending isn't necessarily working.
Right.
So, if you want to ask someone to say, okay, defend no state at all, I say, okay, well, I can try to do that, but then you defend the state.
Right.
I'll ask some questions, too, and it's not necessarily as rosy a picture.
Absolutely.
As most people, maybe they imagine on the surface.
I think it's a good tactic for putting the ball in the other person's court as well, and shifting the burden, if you will, a little bit. It's not only that. I think a lot of people tend not to argue, well, I'm not saying it's perfect because of the fact that it doesn't turn people immediately into angels, and that's kind of the, you have to prove to them that this is the perfect outcome. And I'll just say, it's certainly a better outcome than what we have now, right? And that's part of putting the ball in their court, saying, well, defend what you have now. Well, if it's not perfect, what's the big danger of trying something new?
that's always my problem when someone defends the state is I'm always like, okay, prove to me then that these people who are you think are qualified to use force against us, to threaten us with force, are somehow more moral, more ethical, somehow superior to all the other people that we're worried about, so that they would not aggress against us or make the wrong choices or do things that are unjust. To me, that...
Uh-oh.
Oh, they took an oath, and that works. How's that working for you?
Exactly.
It doesn't take long really when you discuss those things to say that, no, I mean, these politicians and these bureaucrats that are connected with government, that they're not always making just decisions and making decisions that are in your best interest all the time. They're not better than the rest of us. And most of us, if we say, okay, as a class of people, where would you rate politicians in terms of morality and ethics? Most would probably not put them up at the top of the cream of the crop of
absolutely
moral people in our society. So tell me, how are you going to get this moral society with that group of people, which you don't consider to be moral? I mean, most people don't.
Right.
I guess there are some people that would argue that they're the best of us. How's that going to work?
And I think, to your point, I think it's a great point, but I think a lot of the defenders say, well, as long as they do what's legal, right? They use legality as their principle for morality, right?
I would just say, how's that working for you?
That's no doubt. And we got to talk about Jeffrey Tucker's interview, that short thing in a second
Jeffrey
here.
Tucker.
But I want to run through the announcements here quick, and then we'll get to that. And then when I say get to that, we're going to get to a whole bunch of different little things, and we'll go from there. Every week I keep saying that we're going to have Nick on, and we will certainly do that about AgoraFest 2015. That's at Villa Maria Conference Center and Retreat. That's down by Rochester, Minnesota, for people who are not familiar with this at all.
We want to go camping. Now that we found out that you can go camping, I think we should bring all the kids and camp.
The entire clan should be there.
We have a big enough tent.
Yeah, that's right. So that's September 24th to 27th. Save the date.
Oh, and I am in the chat room, by the way, just so I don't forget to mention that.
Oh, you are?
I am. No one is there right now, but I think I'm okay there. I was just...
See, since I'm holding a mic, it makes
letting everyone know.
More challenging to... All right. I just put something in there, just so there's something in there. It looks better.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway, this week I actually did not watch another one of those episodes from Justice, What's the Right Thing to Do? But the last one that I posted, which was episode 6, which again is 2 lectures. It's Mind Your Motive from Harvard Business School with Michael Sandel. And he talked about Immanuel Kant and how difficult he is to read. So, of course, I downloaded some stuff and I started reading it, and I concur. It's very difficult to read. In other words, I'm not entirely sure what I read, but it's interesting
I know nothing
stuff.
about this.
Oh, it's very interesting. Basically, he part of it is what is morality? That's the question he's trying to answer, and give a firm philosophical foundation for his answer as well. Not just, well, I think it should be, whatever. So it's very in-depth, very well done. Difficult to read, though.
Interesting.
And then the other thing I want to just encourage everybody, watch Citizen 4. The link was on the Facebook page. You'll just have to scroll down to find it on the Annoying Peasant Radio Facebook page, by the way. It'll be on there. It's probably way down there. We've been posting stuff, a fair amount of stuff. So we may repost it after the show.
I can post it again.
Yeah, just so it's available to people, or readily available, I should say. I just have to add, I loved it. It was a documentary, not a movie, or it is a documentary, not a movie. You got to watch it, at least just without saying anything really about me. You cannot believe the chicanery that goes on. And you say, well, you already knew basically the whole state is full of that. It is, but to see it again and see specific examples, see what Snowden went through, Glenn Greenwald, etc., it's just another like, oh my goodness. Anyway, I just encourage anybody to watch that if you get a chance. And then the other one, probably the most recently read thing that I finished, was Conscience of an Anarchist by Gary Chartier, former guest of the show. I thought it was actually a very good book. I think a lot of people will really like that book. easy to read. Very readable book. So I think for any of you who have curiosity about this topic at all, that's a good place to go. I wouldn't say it's the only place to go by any means, but I'd encourage you to go there.
That one was free online, right?
Yep.
Hadn't you posted a link a while back?
Yeah, I posted a link for that one too. But again, that one's free online, and free, as far as I know, is a pretty good price. So check that out. Hey, here's a dumb thing I just threw in there. Pi Day is coming. Do you know what Pi Day is?
No.
Oh, Jihadi Justin's the one who got it.
Can I eat pie?
Right. Pi is
really like
3.1415, blah. I don't know the numbers. Well, that's
okay.
coming up on March 14th, 2015, and then even the time, right? I don't remember all the digits. The question is, from which one? Which one is it? From
Lucas is our conscience.
No, what,
Anytime
Statler? From Waldorf?
Yeah.
From Statler or Waldorf? Does this have anything to
If we
do
get
with
off
anything?
of the topic or say anything stupid, we will hear about it.
That's the whole point.
I don't eat pie. I don't care about pie. He does not like fruit pie. He will eat chocolate pie.
Oh,
only.
my goodness. See, that was just called levity, Stadler or Waldorf or whatever your name is. Anyway, I just thought that was interesting. How many times has that happened in your
I don't
lifetime?
know. He'll tell us we're pointless.
Yeah. Anyways, and another thing that's available that I don't even know, I don't remember if I posted this or not, but Economics in One Lesson by Henry Hazlitt is available at full text, and that's at fee.org. You can find it in there. I don't remember what.
Oh, here. I will write it down. I'll try to put it on the...
Yeah, you can find the
page.
specific link in there. But if you go to fee.org, you can find it from there.
That one also might be free audio on Mises.org.
Oh.
I think there's a
It could
lot
be.
of things that are audiobooks on Mises. Just go to Mises.org. Just look around.
Yes.
Just go there.
They're
Seriously, go there.
Great information.
Yeah.
And the
I
price
listen
is right.
to entire books. Yeah, it's lots of free stuff. And
Yeah.
stuff you can buy, too. So.
Yes. So, cool stuff. All right. So, let's talk about Jeffrey Tucker's interview. Jeez, and I can't even remember who he was interviewed by now.
I don't know.
It was
interviewing.
okay. Do you recall the interview? So I'll let you set it up.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I wasn't sure who was even interviewing him, but it was something to the effect of kind of what would anarchy be like, and the person was asking him questions about these DROs, which is, we talk about this a lot, is dispute resolution organizations.
Which Tucker didn't answer very well, by the way.
Yeah, you were critical. Well, see, now I'll give my answer, then I'm like, well, I don't know if I have a better answer, but I guess the question was, if you have a dispute resolution organization, which would replace the state apparatus, would they all have the same legal system? How are you going to settle disagreements and differences in the laws? Or, there'd be all these different systems. How are you going to resolve all the differences? He got into the topic of statutory rape, which was a weird one, but interesting to think about.
For me was, the point is, for those of you who don't know, again, a dispute resolution organization is basically a private system that you individually hire or choose not to hire, right? You could go without a DRO. Mm-hmm. But assuming Tanya had one DRO and I purchased my services from a different company, the point is they may not rely on the same legal foundations and therefore may not essentially have the same quote-unquote laws. Right?
And I think the main topic they got into, maybe that's the reason why they got into that, as far as statutory rape would be kind of like age of consent.
Yes.
I guess would be the difference. Like, okay, what if one says it's 18 and one says it's 16?
Yes.
But then I thought, well, how would that, the argument was there'd be so many laws in conflict. Nobody would know whether they're, following the same thing, or how do I know whether I'm supposedly committing a crime by the standards of one DRO?
Exactly.
And so I said, I don't know if I have a better answer, but I thought, well, wouldn't you then just be responsible? We have all these different laws in conflict now. Don't they say we commit 3 felonies a day?
Yeah.
So number one, that's not a very good argument, because not knowing what laws you're breaking happens to us all the time because there are so many laws. And then also, I mean, you're completely free. Statutory rape is not the same thing as a violent crime where, there's no consent. It's just whether this person was old enough to give consent. So, you have the ability to stop and say, wait, which dispute resolution organization do you have? Especially with today's technology. I mean, you could, I guess this is my answer, is that you could just say, okay, who's your DRO? And you could say, all right, it's this one.
ABC
and you could
Corporation.
just look it up and say, what's the age of consent?
Right.
And then, and if the person lied and said, I'm 18 and they're 16, then you've got a completely different issue because that's fraud.
Exactly.
So
now you'd have to show it in front of some kind of impartial court, but it is in fact fraud.
Right, but then it becomes a completely different
argument
issue.
Yep.
Wouldn't you agree?
Yes. But here's my analogy that I like to point to right away. If you say, wait a minute, a system certainly can't work if there's 300 or 3,000 different DROs, so 3,000 potentially different standards of law, right? And my answer would be, oh, okay, let's just assume for a moment it cannot work. It's unworkable.
All right.
So how does the United States, don't we engage in trade thousands of times a day with Canada, Mexico, Ireland? Well,
it's anarchy, I tell you.
How could that possibly work? I mean, we can't trade with them because they have a different
laws and all different systems.
And clearly, people who live on the southern border of Canada and the northern and the Canadian border of the U.S., they clearly be shooting at each other just constantly.
Well, and there's quite a large difference in governments and laws and everything, even within this country.
The states,
much
counties,
less.
Ordinances.
Right. Like I said, even with the laws that are, like kind of universal or national,
right?
You're still committing 3 felonies a day, and you don't know it. So it's not really a very good argument.
To the credit of the questioner, though, I think his point, and I don't think he did a good job of making it, but I think his point was, or I'm assuming his point was, well, wait a minute, so, the statutory rape deal. So, and I have no idea what the laws are. Again, say Illinois is 18, Wisconsin is 16. Mm-hmm. So I can know because, hey, I just crossed the state line. I'm in Illinois. It's 18. I don't even care if the girl is from Louisiana because Illinois, right? So from that sense, he may argue it's a little easier under the current system, okay, because of his geography. And you could argue I think that's where he should have gone. I don't think he really did that. But if you have to go
look up the laws of Wisconsin, it's just as easy to say, what's your DRO, and look it up. Maybe it's not very romantic. I don't know. But if you're going to check and see what state you're in, you could say, by the way, what company are you?
I think there are some college campuses today that have like consent forms or something.
That would make sense.
That's pretty romantic too. Hey, honey, by the way, could you sign this before?
Wow.
Yeah. I don't know how we got there.
We keep getting into all these weird topics about Anyway, that's interesting. But I thought, wouldn't that then be, if there's self-ownership, I guess, would different DROs, if some of it would be dealing with parents, but then, it seems to me that, if a young person has ownership in themselves, I guess this is a little bit of a difficult issue within liberty because people do differ on what is the age of consent, who is a child who cannot consent. Oops. Sorry, Luke just did something to my computer that I have to now shut down. But anyway, he turned on Skype. I'm not on Skype. Okay. Anyway, so I don't know how that would work. I guess it would basically be whether there's still parental control or whether that person has the right to consent themselves.
Yes, and there's a lot even to be worked out. And I think Jeffrey Tucker was fantastic when he basically when he was asked the question, he says, well, I don't know. And he was like, well, how would it get worked out? And he goes, well, it's actually not for me to decide anyway, which is accurate. I think it wasn't an answer that the questioner wanted, but it was a good answer.
Well, people get frustrated when you give answers like, I couldn't know, I can't possibly know how that would work. Everybody wants a final answer. But I think it's legitimate to say in a free society, people are capable of working these things out for themselves. It's not a cop-out. It really is just sincerely that I don't know how people would work it out. But I trust that they have the ability and the intelligence. If people can form a government and they can figure out a way to use force against everyone else in society and they can do all of this, then can't they manage their own freedom and their own lives and decide for themselves, work out their own voluntary associations?
The only way you could object to that, in my view, is say, no, the only way those things can work is by monopoly force.
Right.
You have to say, no, one agency, one DRR couldn't possibly compete with another.
But if individual people on their own are not capable of knowing how to conduct their lives, then how are they capable of doing it as a group?
Because the sheep herder tells us which direction to move in.
Where do you find the sheep herder who's not as evil and selfish and corrupt as the rest of the group?
You have a popularity contest.
So the most popular guy is the one you need.
Yes. That makes him more moral because he's more popular than you.
Because the majority agrees.
Yes. Actually, not even a majority, of course, right? It's a plurality because what's the percentage of people who are eligible to vote, blah, blah, blah. That whole scam, that's really a small percentage.
It's actually a small percentage of people, but
yeah,
they're good enough and moral enough to be capable of picking the guy or the group of people who are good enough and moral enough and wonderful and pure enough to direct all the rest of us.
Yes, but usually...
with the use of force.
Yes, but it usually hinges on, did you send emails using your personal account or your government account? That's how... And do you look presidential?
Yeah, I guess that's it.
The serious issues of the day, Tanya. Very serious.
Right, because we got to know who's going to order us around. So we need to know whether these people are qualified or not.
Yes.
So this is important stuff.
Absolutely. It's so absurd. We're just obviously having fun.
I have to say hi to Cassie because she's in the chat and I haven't chatted yet, but hi Cass.
Hi,
she never
Cassie.
gets to listen, so she's my good friend. Well, she's our good friend, but my very good friend, and I'm happy when she gets to listen.
I'm sorry, Cassie, that since I'm male, I can't do two things at once. I can't talk on the show and join you in the chat. But I know Lisa's going to be in there shortly, and I don't know who else is going to be joining you. Hopefully, there'll be more people.
Cassie and I are very good at multitasking.
Yes,
we have multiple children.
Yes, so you can do it. You have practice.
Yeah.
Anyway, what snowed? Are we done there, or was there more we should have talked about?
I think so.
Tucker?
I don't know. Did I do okay with that? Yeah. I know you didn't like. I like Jeffrey Tucker, but you didn't like his answer there, and
part of it. I think how could the analogy of how could things possibly work with other countries? Like I call them states. I know that confuses people sometimes, but that's the example. Well, that's how things are today, and you pointed out how different states. Actual states within the United States have different laws anyway, blah, blah. So there are all these complications. And the last thing I think I will add to this is people say, well, this will lead to lots of lawsuits and lots of things. And I think, first of all, the dust will settle really quickly if we were able to flip the switch and go to a free society, right? And I know it's a big if and all this stuff. But I think the dust would settle very quickly. And again, that's my opinion. That's not it will. I think it's in the best interest of the DROs and the people for that to settle quickly.
Right.
And the other point of, well, so there might be a lot of litigation. My other thing is like the strategy you employed earlier. Well, wait a minute. So you're telling me things are settled in this system now? So there's like no court cases going on because it's all settled, right?
Right. Everybody just agrees.
Yeah.
It's all good.
Well, how come there's attorneys then? I don't even know how they're in business because nobody's having a dispute with anyone else because it's all settled, right? It's just a way, in a sense, to try to argue against the philosophy of freedom, and I think it fails on numerous attempts. But it's interesting, if you put that same ball back in their court, they're not too happy about that, is my point.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, what I really want you to do is get a taste of what you're actually asking me and how I can't give you a 2-second concrete, this is how it'll be answer. Because you can't do it either with this system. Now, that doesn't mean that the two ideas are equal. I think the freedom philosophy is far superior, but I think it's not a criticism of the freedom philosophy is my view.
Well, and I always say that it's good to, like, concrete examples are great and possibility thinking is great. And that is really what changed my mind. So it's fine to say, help me understand. I felt for a long time when you were talking to us about these ideas that I really had some concerns and some misgivings and did want to know how might this work, or I was okay with you saying I can't know how it would work, but I am maybe a concrete enough person that I was like, well, give me an example, kind of show me what the possibilities are. And I've told you that, I read the book Chaos Theory by Robert Murphy, and it's just a short little book, almost more of a pamphlet or a couple of essays about the free market and about the kinds of things we're talking about. And it was just kind of like, okay, here's how this might look. And that was really eye-opening for me and helped me a lot. So I think it's legitimate to need more information. I'm not a quick decision maker. I needed to kind of understand more before I was willing to say, okay, I agree with you. But yeah, it's not fair to dismiss you after 5 minutes and say, well, you didn't do a good enough job. So I'm totally for the state, and
you don't have a good case.
You're an idiot. So.
Yeah. I had a bunch of quotes and stuff I read over the week, just disjointed things, but there's one that kind of relates to this, so I want to read it quick and get your thoughts on it, Tanya. Here's a writer wrote, when asked what transformed them from a commie to an ANCAP, that's an anarcho-capitalist, right? The person replied, what changed my mind was being told that corporations can't be regulated effectively because the government itself is responsible for their existence. So true. Most people incorrectly think corporations will rule the world without a government. The reality is, incorporation can only happen with forced collectivism or all of the state. You can't have special government advantages, state corporatism, for businesses when there's no state to hand out these special privileges, subsidies, bailouts, regulatory capture, corporate personhood, blah, 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 right? Without a government, the largest state corporations would lose handfuls of power, but commies can't admit that because it pokes holes in the idea that the collective is there to protect people and proves that scam artists join the forced collectivism to take advantage of it.
That's the elephant in the room that everybody misses. Oh, by the way, I saw that Lisa was in the chat. She said that sound was cutting out again. We need to find out if we're okay there.
I don't know what else to do at the moment.
If you're in the chat, you guys, if you let us know if you can hear us or if that's still a problem.
I'm hardwired in tonight, so I don't know if I can do anything better.
Well, we'll keep talking and I'll see what they say.
Okay.
So maybe it's me. I'm still awkward with this microphone.
No, I think you're more than fine.
I will try to speak right into the mic. But no, I think that's the elephant in the room is this cronyism, this use of the state as a weapon against other people. And people claim that that's the problem with the free market. But it's actually... that's nothing like a free market. That's having a weapon that you can wield against other people. If it didn't exist, you couldn't use force against people.
I think you
could, but they could defend themselves.
You raise a great point, but you also lead me into another thing, the Walter Block debate with Bill Quigley. And I think basically, maybe, arguably, the fatal flaw in my view that Bill Quigley had was that he thought essentially what I think you and I call crony capitalism. I think he equated that. He thought that's actually the free market.
Yeah, he didn't distinguish.
Right.
And he actually said that. He considers crony capitalism to be capital. Capitalism and crony capitalism are the same thing.
Yeah.
And we're defining them differently.
Yes. And I think you have to, though. Right? How can you claim that just a summary of voluntary exchanges is the same as maybe those and some different exchanges happening, what with the injection of the initiation of violence or force in it, making some people make some exchanges and making them not make other exchanges? How can those two situations be the same? I don't get that.
Maybe it's hard for people to understand what we're talking about. I don't know if I can explain it better. Is that actually what we're talking about here is this debate. It's on the Facebook page between, what was the guy's name? Walter Block was the one, and
Bill Quigley.
Okay, so they're having this debate about the minimum wage, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, whether we should have it or not. And, this Bill Quigley was arguing that basically his argument against the free market is that it's not a free market.
Yeah.
But that doesn't make a lot of sense, because you can't say, he kept arguing that there's all this corporate privilege, that these big corporations and everything have these special privileges that the little guy doesn't get, and so we need the minimum wage. Well, he was almost making Block's argument for him, saying it's the state that is the problem. But if you don't distinguish between a free market and a market where there's crony capitalism, where these large corporations can gain all this privilege at the expense of everybody else, if they have a mechanism to do that, you're not talking about the same thing. Am I explaining this right? I don't know, because this is really important to me. This is such a biggie that it seems like people don't understand.
I think one thing I want to ask you first, and then I got a comment later, but is for our audience, explain to them, when you say the free market, what is that?
It's voluntary exchanges between people, unhampered by any use of force.
Right.
I guess, is that?
Yes, right? I'm on board with that, right? And the theory is, if it's a voluntary exchange, both parties, I'm now the word escaped, gain wealth. They're better off.
Yes.
Right. And
by the way, I think Cassie said our sound is good on her phone. Lisa thought it must be her computer, so I don't know.
Okay.
Hopefully, just let us know if there's any problem with the sound.
Anyway,
yeah, that's it, I guess.
And I think people have trouble though understanding that in a voluntary exchange, wealth is created.
Both people get richer.
Yes,
because you decide. I say I have $5 and you have a dozen organic eggs, and I would rather have the eggs than the $5, and you would rather have the $5 than the eggs, and we make an exchange, and we're both better off.
Yes.
We created wealth.
Right. And I think,
it's not a zero-sum game.
And that's how most people look at it.
Yeah.
No wealth can be created because there's still $5 and there's still eggs.
Right, but isn't it beautiful that when we exchange, suddenly we're both happier and we're both better off, and we've both profited. By a certain definition.
So if you're hungry, let's just try to make this, aren't you better off eating a dozen organic eggs than you are eating a $5 bill?
Yeah.
Right? $5 bill's not real tasty, and it's not very nutritious besides. It won't really sustain you for the next day. And there's a whole thing of, if I have 80 dozens of eggs, what's the marginal
marginal utility
of the 80th
it's
dozen?
One of the only things about economics that I know
is very low. I don't want to get into the whole discussion about that.
If you have a whole bunch of something, then one of them just doesn't seem as valuable to you as if you just have one,
right?
Or a small number. So that's the marginal utility of each one of those units.
And that's why wealth is created. Definitely on my side, when I give you my 80th dozen, I still got 79. I had no even remotely close to scarcity here.
Right.
Plus, I got $5.
And for the $5, you're willing to make the trade. But now maybe if the price is $6, I don't want the eggs more than I want $6. So I'll keep my $6 and you'll keep your eggs, and no exchange will be made.
Exactly. So the point is, in a free market, what's the problem with people just deciding to make exchanges on their own without being forced or being forced not to make such an exchange, right?
Yeah.
How does forcing people to make an exchange they wouldn't otherwise make, or stopping them from making an exchange that they would voluntarily make, how does that help? Right? That's a basic question. So that's one of the many arguments I would make for a free market is superior to a hampered market or a regulated market or crony capitalism, if you will.
Now, a lot of people think that a minimum wage law is the exception to this, though. Maybe people kind of understand that there's a problem. If eggs cost too much, you won't want to buy them, but most people don't really consider that if labor costs too much, you won't want to buy it. So this debate was about the minimum wage, which is a really interesting.
Yes, Cassie makes a point. I'm sorry, I'm switching gears.
Yeah, it's hard. We're not watching the chat very well. I'm trying a little bit.
And Cassie makes the point that anarchy, or I would just basically call freedom, is wrongly defined as chaos. and to some degree with good reason. If you open the Webster Dictionary and looked at it, I think the first definition is chaos. So I don't blame people for having that understanding of it necessarily. I would make the argument in this debate that we're talking about between Bill Quigley and Walter Block. Bill Quigley should know, right? If I'm entering in a debate, I'm going to research on basically what your position is going to be because I'm going to prepare to be able to shoot down every one of your arguments. So you can't enter a debate not knowing, but I guess you can. But
I would not say he did a very good job of doing that.
And I agree. Just to reiterate what we said, and Cassie says, hey, capitalism is wrongly defined as crony corporatism. And I happen to use the words a little differently because I think it gives a better definition. I call it a free market, or to me, it's not the same as capitalism. Because you can have a capitalist in a free market, right? He can engage, but you can also have a capitalist in Russia, the former Soviet Union, who Putin is a very good capitalist. I think he wasn't a very wealthy man when he got into government, but I believe he's the richest man on the Asian continent now.
Well, yeah, I guess that's true. You could have no capital at all, but still be engaging in exchanges in the free market. I don't have to be. I don't know, how do you define capital? How much do you have capital?
Right.
I don't know.
But you could have capital in both systems. The one is you're using the long arm of the law to help you create an advantage, and the other system you're not. So what I'm saying is capitalists can exist in both of those situations, and that's why to me the word capitalism is a little confusing because what kind of capitalism do you mean? Do you mean free market capitalism or do you mean crony capitalism? So I just call it the free market or a hampered market or regulated market or something else. So when I say the free market, I mean the free market, not crony capitalism.
Well, and I would define, crony capitalism is using the state as a weapon, connecting with the state, gaining the use of the state, which has the threat of force at their disposal.
Yes, no doubt.
To make things end up to your advantage.
Absolutely. Which
that favors the big guy over the little guy because... part of that is hiring lobbyists, but what other ways would you say that, and I'm not even saying people are evil. In one way, I'd say they're evil when they engage in this, but unfortunately we live in the system we live in, and even to conduct any business at all, you often have to defend yourself by using the state against other people that are using the state. So in a way, most everyone gets sucked into it.
Yes. Sorry, I was looking at text. Brad may be calling in here at some point. Anyway,
okay. Cassie says a capitalist can just love money like Scrooge McDuck. So
I'm not as familiar with Scrooge McDuck as I should be, so I apologize for that.
I think there's a whole economic video, there's a whole scene that kind of explains capitalism, if I'm not wrong. I'll try to look it up.
Okay, so I want to make one more comment on the Quigley-Block debate. And that was, I think...
Oh, come on. I have 2 pages of notes on this.
No, you keep going.
It's okay.
It
was interesting.
I'm tapped out after one more, is my point. But, so he said, Bill Quigley says, basically, since the state is intervening with the capitalists or the big guys... My solution to that problem, essentially, and I'm putting words in his mouth and wording what he said, but the solution to that problem is to use the state to help the little guy. Now, yes, there's still an argument whether the minimum wage helps or hurts him. Just put that aside for a second. He's saying, so the solution to state intervention is state intervention, is the way I interpreted what he said.
That's what I was saying. His argument against the free market was that it's not free. It's all these corporations have exemptions for their private jets and all of their luxuries and all of this stuff. Therefore, we need to have a minimum wage law to make it fair. But that, Block was arguing that doesn't work. That the minimum wage law does not help the poor. It doesn't fix the system. So I don't know. What were his kind of main arguments? But this Quigley guy was arguing that this is kind of this moral, ethical argument that we have to do this collectively to help the poor, and even saying it's a religious argument. But
yes,
I really take issue with that as a person of faith myself. I really gets my dander up when someone tries to make the argument that it is that using a threat of force against people to do what you want is making a moral argument. I take issue with that. And I, as a religious person myself, I don't like the word religious, but that's personal there. I'm like, no, I don't believe that. And so I don't think it's fair to make that argument. It sounds good. It all sounds very nice and moral and high-minded.
I would argue weakly, he said, well, if I remember this correctly, correct me if I'm wrong, he said basically the Pope has said this. Mm-hmm. I'm like, okay, so what?
Yeah, well...
Well, can't he be wrong too? Or I guess that's not possible?
I guess it depends who you ask.
To basically... to defend my argument by saying, well, that guy said it. I don't get how you go, oh, well, okay, then.
Well, yeah, a lot of his argument was that, there are Nobel Prize winners who agree with me and the Pope agrees with me and all these people agree with me. Well, that's fine. I guess that's helpful, but, it doesn't really make your argument for you. And then one argument, he said that because Walmart raised their wages, that was his kicker at the end of his opening statement was, see, Walmart did this. So now that right there is proof that we need a minimum wage line. Like I wrote LOL. Because I was like, okay, because Walmart voluntarily raised wages, we need a law to force everyone to raise wages. And that makes your point. That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So. I'm going to try to summarize Block's argument. He's saying it's not, the minimum wage does not act as a floor to wages like, the proponents say. We want to raise the floor. So the guy who's making minimum wage now, whatever, $7.25 is going to make $10.10 or whatever the exact numbers were, right? So we're actually, his view is, therefore a guy gets a raise from $7.25 to $10.10. We're helping him, right? And Block said, no, it's actually not a floor that's rising. It's a hurdle to overcome, right?
Yes.
And then he tried to give the economic argument for that, hey, if your productivity is $8 an hour, you'll certainly get hired at $7.25 currently. But if the minimum wage goes to $10.10, there's no economic incentive for someone to hire you. Right, because they'll lose basically $2 an hour on your productivity.
Well, Block always makes the point that in this and in his other book that I read that a minimum wage law is not an employment law. It doesn't force anyone to employ anyone.
Yes,
it's only mandatory unemployment.
That's a great point.
It just says below this wage you are prohibited from hiring anyone. So, like you said. This is something that, maybe a lot of people don't think about it, but I mean, as small business owners ourselves, we're a small business with one employee. That a person's productivity they have to be profitable enough for you to justify hiring them. You can't lose $1 an hour on that person, or it'll eventually drain you dry. The person has to be, if a person is completely unskilled, their wage has to be low enough that you can justify hiring them. Even if it's just, we have the case where, our one employee, I think this is just such a great example because, Luke is a one-man show most of the time where, he's a small contractor and he builds homes and, but he would he does not want to run a big crew, but he was fine with like training one or two guys or whatever. So he's always on the lookout for someone like that who is willing and trainable.
Sure.
But most people he finds want really high wages, but they are not productive enough to be able to be profitable for us.
Right.
We would hire them at a loss, at least at the quality level that we want or, the skill level that we want. Their skills are not profitable enough to be worth what they want. So most people we can't hire.
Right.
But then this young guy comes along and wants to learn a trade and is willing to work for a lower wage. And we say, yes, okay, we could justify if maybe all he can do right now is pick up scraps and sweep and run to town and do stuff. He's not skilled.
Right.
But he can learn skills, and if he's willing to work at a low enough wage to be able to afford him while he's learning the skills, then that can work. And that's a voluntary arrangement that people make that gets prohibited by the minimum wage laws. Because I thought of an example, like, what if a kid came to you that just graduated from high school and said, I got to decide whether I'm going to learn to be a carpenter on the job training or I'm going to go pay for trade school. And you say, I can't afford to hire you because you don't have any skills. You know nothing.
Right.
But then what if he says, I'll work for you for $5 an hour all summer. And then at the end of the summer, you can either, give me a raise and keep me on, or fire me and I'll go borrow money to go to trade school.
Right.
Well, isn't that an arrangement that people could make? But that would be prohibited by a minimum wage law, because you could not negotiate for a lower wage and say, hey, I'm willing to work for a low pay.
Absolutely. Right. That they talked about the downward sloping demand curve, right? If the price is lower, how much would you want of it? Certainly more. It depends on how elastic the curve is, blah, 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 right? And it seems to work. Most statists support, I think they use the example of cigarettes. Raise the price of cigarettes, you sell less cigarettes. You lower the price of cigarettes, you sell more cigarettes. But I think, if I remember right, Walter Block even asked, so how does that not apply to labor? I mean, How do these things apply to everything else? But then you say, but labor's an exception. Why? And basically said, because everybody who works a full-time job should get a reasonable, I can't remember what
a living wage.
Yeah, a living wage. And then I think a lot of people, I think on emotional grounds will say, yeah, if you work full-time, you should get a living wage. But I think in that regard, Walter Block came with the best retort on that, and he said, okay, wait a minute. If that's the case, a living wage today is, a car with air conditioning and a automatic transmission, whatever, a house, a color television set, and a refrigerator. Okay, but so you're saying everybody in 1776, no one paid a living wage because essentially no one had those items then.
Right, everyone was at a lower standard of living. Even the wealthiest person.
Right, could not afford those items, or they didn't even exist at the time. So they weren't paying a living wage. So what they paid should be deemed illegal, right? So how would anyone ever get trained, right? Because at least for productivity purposes, the vast majority of your training is on the job, not in the classroom or whatever you did beforehand. So no one would be able to. If it was all illegal to work, then no one would have work experience. We wouldn't be able to do anything.
Right. And so it creates this huge gap where there is not this mechanism whereby people can work for lower wages and gain productivity so they're worth more.
Exactly.
I look at this exchange, if there's my husband and a person who wants to learn the trade, that the arrangement works for both of them, because maybe you're not real profitable for me right now, but maybe in training you, maybe on the next house I build, maybe you actually know something, and so that's worth something or worth a little bit more money. And the other person then says, that's that time preference thing. See, I'm learning economics here. It has a low time preference. It says, I don't need to make as much money now, because by the time I'm done building this house over the course of a whole year, I will be more productive and more employable and worth more money. I could take a job for a little bit higher wage right now, or I could take a low wage job right now and increase my worth by this time next year.
Right.
So that's where you're making an investment in your future.
Absolutely. By
working for a low wage, you can literally make an investment in higher wages for your future. And laws like this will prevent you from being able to do that.
I would argue the way you get to higher wages is you start with lower wages.
Lower wages.
That's right. That's how you get on-job training. That makes you more productive, and therefore you're worth higher wages.
Well, and they also, in part of this debate was whether, that Walter Block argued that wages are not a function of employer generosity.
Right.
That you have to be productive at a certain level. Like if minimum wage is $7.25, a guy asked a question at the end even. He says, well, what about all these people that aren't worth $7.25 that are working? What would happen to them if you took away the minimum wage? And, his argument was there isn't anybody working who's worth less than $7.25. No one can afford, if minimum wage is $7.25, if you're only productive at the level of $7 an hour, then you are a losing
proposition,
and there will be no job for you.
Right.
If you raise the minimum wage to what you call a living wage, and let's say you decide that's $12 an hour, there will just be less jobs for people at a living wage, and everybody else will be at zero.
Yes.
All the unskilled people who cannot be productive at that level.
And the examples put forth were numerous. The elevator operator job, the guy who filled your gas tank, who washed your windshield, who checked your oil. Geez, I can't remember them all.
Well, I'm going to sound really bad here, but I was excited about Walmart raising their minimum wage because I'm waiting for the do-it-yourself checkout, because I don't think the Walmart cashiers at my Walmart do a very good job, and I'm better at it, and I want to do it myself.
Get out of there faster.
So I'm looking forward to putting in a few of those options where I can just go skip the checkout line with the Walmart employees, and I'm going to go over here and go for the automated version. But that's what happens. They find it more worthwhile to invest in the new technology.
Yes.
And
less in labor.
They can be more productive and profitable with a technology that does not require an employee, a warm body.
Yep.
Then that's what they'll do. Now, there's nothing wrong with developing new technology. That's good, but it skews the market. It changes the way that those things happen and the way that those things come into play.
Exactly.
It pushes it.
Yes, it definitely pushes it.
Instead of just letting it happen organically.
So, and again, I don't think Dr. Block was making that, just asking the question, are you better off with not having the elevator operator guy? Well, you are today because of the technology makes it so easy to operate an elevator versus what it took, I don't know how many years ago, 50 years ago? I don't know the time frames.
Time, probably more.
A while ago, right? Think about the bank teller is slowly going away because of the ATM machine. Now, actually, so far on the ATM machine, I don't think you're going to get a whole ton of people saying, I'm happy to deal with that machine versus a teller, because sometimes you have...
Right.
The other example that wasn't raised but I like is, what about the voice-driven menu, I don't know, for banks, for the cable television companies, right? Mm-hmm. If you have a question with
everybody
this,
that you try to call.
Yeah, dial 7. Hit the right. Do people love that stuff? Overall, don't most people try to get to a voice to talk to somebody? Well, this is what's happening as a result of the minimum wage going up, that it's not affordable for these companies to have people staffed there who may even not get called for a while, right? It's too expensive. If it was inexpensive for them, they'd likely have them there.
Now, this Quigley guy that was arguing for the minimum wage, I mean, he seemed to concede that he says, well, the minimum wage isn't the answer to poverty, but it will help those who earn the minimum wage. Well, of course it helps those who earn the minimum wage. Everybody who takes a job for that pay will be helped by having that job. But everybody who is no longer employable at that wage will not be helped.
Right.
By the minimum wage.
And that was the basically concluding argument of Walter Block was, hey, in the end, I'm not arguing that actually some people might be helped by this, but on balance, net, we're worse off with a minimum wage than we are without having one. And I think they, of course, struggle with that because, well, it's immoral to not pay a living wage. And
well, he says a business has no right to exist, which depends on paying less than a living wage.
That was Bill Quigley.
I thought, wait a minute. Now, okay, let's say my husband decided that he would like to, his entire business, that he would like to always be training 2 young people as carpenters. He would always just like to have someone in training. And so he would always be paying less than a living wage because they would not be worth employing at a living wage. It just wouldn't be worth it. We would lose too much money. We couldn't take the risk that they would get up to speed fast enough. We're too small of a business. We just we don't have this pot of money somewhere where we can pay someone for a year who doesn't know how to do anything.
Right.
So, we just wouldn't be able to do that. But isn't that good for? I mean, I consider it good for society, good for the wage, for the labor pool, good for everything. If some employers are willing to take a chance on people and train them,
absolutely,
to be able to learn a trade.
No doubt. All right. What did I miss? What did you want to hit on that discussion? Because I have before I said I had a last thing, I lied. I got a new last thing, and you might get a chuckle out of this when you recall this. So, what didn't Walter Block bring up that Nancy Pelosi was interviewed by someone and asked about the whole minimum wage thing, right? And brought up the internship thing, right? The way you get around currently the minimum wage is there was another exception, the food servers that got a minimum wage at $2.13.
I'm not sure what the exceptions are because I think there is still some internship.
Yes, and that was the point. You hired him as an intern, and then there was some law, some rule that they were like non-essential. I can't remember how you had to classify them or how you had to characterize the work they did. But then she was asked, "Well, don't you have unpaid interns on your staff?" And I guess she just kind of blew a head gasket and let it go at that. I just thought that was interesting. Again, it's the same deal of, okay, you're passing these laws that businesses must comply with or they face a stiffer penalty that the state applies. But unfortunately, it doesn't apply to Nancy Pelosi. And I'm not I guess I am singling her out, but I don't intend to single just her out. There's probably plenty of guys on the Republican side that do the same thing.
Well, that's another big problem with arguing for the state because don't those people always somehow create an exemption for themselves?
Coincidentally, of course.
It always only applies to you and me, but never to them. And yet they're the ones that are qualified to protect the rest of us from all this evil, all this inequality.
Yes.
And that doesn't happen.
If you can't trust people with freedom, how can you trust them with authority?
Amen.
All right. Since I am totally tapped out now, you tell me, is there anything we missed from that?
Well, I don't know. Black made a good point of saying, people, and it tends to be liberals kind of, argue for all whatever consenting adults want to do, they should be able to do, except agree to an employer-employee relationship.
Yes.
Isn't it, if I say I will work for you for $3 an hour and you say, yes, I'll take that deal, isn't that an act between consenting adults?
Right.
Shouldn't they have the right to make that agreement and to do that? That's a voluntary
No,
arrangement.
voluntary should not happen according to the state.
It's not slavery. It's absolutely voluntary. It's not compulsory. No one has forced them to enter into that relationship.
As Walter Block said, that's the chasm of a difference between those two things. One is forced and one is not forced. That's not a subtle difference.
Well, people would say then you're exploiting people.
Yes. That is the criticism, that if you pay them only $3 an hour, that's exploiting them. Well, okay. Again, if it's voluntary, I would argue it defies the definition of exploitation. But on the other hand, and I realize it's a different economy, but all these people that are in, I don't know what countries, Bangladesh, Vietnam, India, I don't know if they actually, some other, that are paid what most Americans would call a very low wage. Well, they're not forced to take those jobs. I don't understand why they're taking those jobs. And I don't know what the exact numbers are, but lower wages certainly.
Well, and I've heard that is supposed to be great opportunities for them, and that the standard of living is increasing, with some of these jobs like telemarketers and things like that. I'm not a great expert on it, but that's some of the things that I've read, that they're not considering themselves to be exploited.
Right.
They're quite happy with the arrangement.
Yes, and I'm not saying the working conditions and their upward mobility and all that stuff is up to American standards. But again, if it's a voluntary situation, they could still say, "Hey, I could got a better opportunity down the road. See you later."
Right. That's what Walter Block says. How do you, someone asked a question at the end, how do you prevent exploitation? He said competition.
Exactly.
You're working for $3 an hour in poor working conditions, and this other person says, I'll pay you $3.10, and it's better working conditions over here. So you go there, and another guy says, I'll pay $3.50. If there's competition, there's a way for wages to rise naturally.
The free market is about
bid up the price.
Alternative and choice. The state is a monopoly, which is by definition no alternatives, no choice.
Right.
Anyway, all right. What else? Help us out.
I don't know. They talked about child labor a little bit, but
yes.
Some of this stuff, all this stuff about exploitation and child labor and everything. I'm reading. Okay, what's the book I said it was? Wendy McElroy. I'm reading her book.
Oh yes.
Now I can't remember the title of the book. About being free. Oh
shoot.
darn! I'm so
Right.
and I'm like you. I'm forgetting stuff.
See?
I always have it written down.
It's contagious.
No, Wendy McElroy. If you look up the author, but in her book, she talks about the fact that all these child labor stories about these children that got sent underneath these big factory looms and things in these really dangerous jobs. That most of those children, especially way back, in England, I don't know how much of this was in the United States, but these were children that were wards of the state that were being sent into these situations. They were kind of handed out as slaves to these big companies, whereas children who were under the umbrella of their parents, they were much more protected because their parents had control over whether they could take a job. And of course, parents have a much greater interest in the safety of their children than the state does.
Absolutely.
And these companies that just wanted to make a profit or whatever, and all these, so these examples that get used of all this exploitation of children, really, it's once again point the finger at the state.
Right.
Not completely, but I mean,
Right.
a lot of it is what like. I know Cassie, likes Oliver Twist and some of these, stories that, those were parish children. They were farmed out by the state.
Oh, jeez.
So it's a little fact that we just never really.
Yes, discuss. Yeah, we don't bring that out. All right, anything else on that, Tanya?
I don't know. Can you measure productivity of a person? That was another question.
Oh, yeah.
How would you measure someone's productivity? How do you know if they're worth $7.25 an hour or $10.10?
I think everybody, I shouldn't say everybody, a lot of situations it's essentially tracked or booked differently to know. And there's I think there's no surefire way of being able to tell somebody, but I think a chunk of it is subjective, right? It's a judgment and it's saying, hey, I'm seeing that things are working much more efficiently here. I see that I have a little more cash coming in, or I have more in receipts that are out there that should come in. My situation is improving now that I have this guy, these workers with me. Whether they want to try to calculate it down to each individual person or not, that's up to any business owner that wants to do that. So I think there is an element of subjectiveness, and I think who better to decide than, I don't know, the manager, the owner, the supervisor, whatever title you want to give that person, the person responsible for their productivity.
Right. Is this person profitable for me? Because you can also say, hey, this person I'm paying low wages to now, I'm investing in my business for next year.
Yes.
I'm paying them. I've hired a person who's unskilled. Maybe they're not even really worth the low wages I'm paying them, but I'm betting on
next year,
the idea
the year
that
after.
they are going to be more productive. But if you're good at that, if you're good at measuring productivity, you will be more profitable than the person who's bad at it, and the market will weed you out if you're bad at it.
Yes, and there's
that
more.
was Block's argument.
Can you develop a personnel? Can you develop skills, right? At all those things that fold into this. But
and some
certainly,
businesses are going to be more profitable with lots of unskilled, low-paid people.
Yes.
And others are going to want to develop skills and build, and train and continue to do that. So, I mean, it's just going to be different for every business that you're in.
Absolutely.
So
okay.
that's it. That's about. I could go on, but that was
okay. So
that was interesting.
So we're going to go a little lighter, and I see Tim has joined us. Thanks for joining us, Tim. Great to have you with us as always.
He says the marginal product of labor. I knew Tim would have something smart for
Yeah.
us, and he's got a link for me.
Oh, geez, see, we got to
teach me something about economics. I am kind of a new student of economics. I always say I was dragged kicking and screaming into a little bit of study of economics because you need to know a little bit about economics. If you advocate for freedom,
yes,
economics is important.
Yes, because the free market is a big part of that.
Right.
So it's handy to be able to explain some things to people.
And it's not just boring facts and figures. It's about morality and ethics and justice and all of these things that we talk about.
That's what I think is most interesting. But,
right, me too.
Okay, so now I'm going to switch gears on you completely, and I'm going to throw out a quote, and it's stuff we touch on all the time, but I just thought this was from the Statism is Slavery site, and I don't know if you've seen this one. Someone said to me, it's horrible the brainwashing those poor North Koreans go through. Is this ringing a bell with you yet?
Okay, yeah.
I responded, what's disturbing is that you don't realize it's happened to you on a somewhat smaller scale by your own government. You really think you are immune from the state propaganda? You believe in a state. To me, that is proof it happened to you. right? They still haven't responded to this person.
Most Americans would vehemently argue
Yes.
against that, but I would agree.
I just thought that was a kind of a interesting one. I like the ones that make you laugh a little bit too. You know, a little fun in them. All right, from this one, I'm assuming you saw, but again, I don't know. From Free Your Kids. Do you see that?
Oh, I know that one. Yep.
Okay. I wonder why everyone loves to bitch about the government, but if I ask them to just consider the possibility that humans could thrive without one, they look at me as though I've gone mad.
Been there.
Right. Just interesting stuff. A quote from Robert A. Heinlein. Be wary of a strong drink. It can make you shoot at tax collectors and miss.
Where's Luke? Did he hear that?
Yeah, he would like that one.
He left.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to repeat that one if you didn't hear that. So,
this one, of course, a lot more serious, but still, I think a good one. This is from Isabel Patterson.
oh yeah,
Most of the harm in the world is done by good people and not by accident, lapse, or omission. It is the result of their deliberate actions, long persevered in, which they hold to be motivated by high ideals toward various ends.
I think that one came from Cassie, and we put it on the Facebook
Did it?
page, didn't it?
See,
Was that from you, Cass? Because that was good. Isabel Patterson is good. One of the rare women, of liberty.
Wendy McElroy,
Wendy
Mary
McElroy
Ruwart.
is one, yeah. Rose Wilder is usually included in that group, some of the older ones, but women are kind of few and far between.
They are.
That's a good one. I mean, people think, that's a big one for me. People think that what they're doing is moral and right, but they're committing violence in the name of morality,
Yes.
which when you really think about it, it doesn't make sense.
Yes. That's one of the things we ask on the show, that you think about things a little more in depth. We try to ask you to hang in there to gain the context that is required in some cases to really get into this and understand what you're actually advocating.
Yeah, and I've said this so many times before, and I was just talking to Luke about it. We went out to lunch the other day, and kind of talking about that moment where you kind of make a shift in your mind. And that big moment for me was one time at our Liberty group. I've told you before that right before we went home, you said I was kind of making arguments for the state, or kind of like exceptions that you need the state maybe for this or that. I was worried about what could happen. And you said, so you advocate for the use of force and initiating force against people. You are okay with that. You say that is necessary. I don't remember exactly how you worded it, but I knew then I was caught. That was my defining moment. It was, no, I don't believe that. No, but I am arguing for that. And Cass just posted cognitive dissonance. Yeah, we talk about that a lot, but it was that moment of cognitive dissonance where I was like, I have to settle this. I have to settle this in my mind. From that moment, it was, I have to settle this issue once and for all. I can't just argue for one thing and then see how inconsistent I am and stay in that place. And that was uncomfortable, but
yes,
you got to do the work.
It's tough. It is actually, for someone who, the only people I would argue that enter into that are curious. They really want to understand. They want to think about their own positions. And it obviously is different for everyone. But I think generally that suits the case. And then when you're confronted with just something like you had described, that you can't square where, I guess, in a sense, where you were with where you thought you were.
Well, and I'm like that as much as anyone else. And it's probably why it took me such a long time. Because I want to argue for my own particular point of view as much as anyone. But I think to be intellectually honest, to be just honest with yourself, that sometimes you have to say, wait, I am saying something that's inconsistent. And instead of just trying to look good or trying to win the argument, to stop and say, no, I'm going to think about that.
Yep.
And I don't have to just be right.
I think this is something I would argue a lot of freedom supporters, my personal view is that they're worthy of actually a fair amount of praise, because it takes a fair amount of courage to first put yourself through that rigorous cycle, right? Thinking, well, I know I'm a moral person, but I thought that, but I don't know how that could have been moral. But I was so sure I was a moral person, but I was advocating actually. And
I know it's painful to realize that you argued for something that you then believe is immoral.
Yes.
You know, when you realize it's hard. You want to, you just want to block that out.
Yeah, you want to absolve the record.
You don't want to admit that. We don't want to admit we're wrong.
Right. And the second part of that is not only when you do that, it is a bit of a coming out, if you will.
Oh, yeah.
Other people in society, some of your former quote-unquote friends think, okay, wait a minute, you're so messed up. I thought you were, right? So you do your relationships with some or whatever proportion of your friends actually changes. It did in my view. And actually my circle of friends changed a little bit, right? Yeah. Because you wind up, looking for reinforcement to some degree from like-minded people. You look for encouragement from them, and it's a comfort zone also to be with some of those. And I'm not saying you need to be with them all the time, but that is some of the purpose that they serve. So you you're drawn to that to some degree, and again, different with everybody.
Well, Luke and I have this conversation all the time, how it's different. Like, it's different for him than it is for me. I'm at home with my kids. I homeschool my kids. I'm an at-home mom, and so I don't have the same interactions with people that he has. He's trying to run a business, and he's interacting with people all the time who think he should be regulated and he should be forced and he should do this and that, and he gets really frustrated. So, we kind of talk about how much do you just try to associate with people who agree with your point of view, or how good is it to, you've got to decide what works for you or who you want to interact with on a regular basis. But you can't decide if you're running a business. You have no choice.
That's true. But on a personal level with your circle of friends, I think it's even bigger than that, because I'll make this point. So if you're going to associate closely with people who support the state, you as someone who recognizes what freedom is, I'm going to associate with a person who believes it's legitimate to infringe on my property rights, to steal my stuff.
Right. That's one that Luke likes. Stefan Molyneux has a video that's called Against Me.
Okay.
And he makes this argument. He says, okay, ask all your friends and family, are you willing to enforce these things against me? Are you willing to enforce threats of violence against me? And if you really go there,
yes,
it may end some of your associations. It's a difficult. Sometimes you don't want to know. I don't want to ask that question.
Right.
Because it's hard. It's hard to have that kind of a disagreement. That's not just an agree to disagree, because it's a foundational moral question.
Yes. I mean, how many of you are good friends with people who have been convicted of stealing your property? I don't know. They stole your car. Then do you go to befriend those people? How many? I'm going to argue that's a small percentage of people who do that. Right? You just typically don't, because it's not good social etiquette. It usually doesn't gain you friends by violating someone's property rights. It tends to lose you friends. And people instinctively know that. That's why they typically don't do that. So, anyway.
It is a frustration. Cassie gave us another quote here. I lost my train of thought. There was something I was going to say, but she gave us a quote. So, let me see what this says. Of all tyrannies, a tyranny sincerely exercised for the good of its victims may be the most oppressive. It would be better to live under robber barons than under omnipotent moral busybodies. The robber baron's cruelty may sometimes sleep. His cupidity may at some point be satiated. But those who torment us for our own good will torment us without end, for they do so with the approval of their own conscience.
I've seen that before.
C.S. Lewis.
Yes, I've seen that before. Thanks.
Very good.
Kathy. See, that was a good one.
She also says what we were talking about. It hurts, but it's humbling, and it's also the key to helping others find freedom.
Good one. That's a great point.
I think being honest. I think that's good. Yeah. I think being humble, being willing to admit that, I was really wrong about some of these things at one point. Yeah, pride puts up a lot of roadblocks, I think.
It's hard to overcome.
At least for me. I don't know about you. You seem to be more humble than I am. I have a hard time admitting when I'm wrong. So,
no.
But that's why it's easier to listen to you. I think that's why you are effective at kind of teaching that philosophy, because you are humble and don't really, you just ask good questions and just kind of draw that out of people. I think instead of draw it out, not pound it in, I guess would be
I think
the way to do it.
And ultimately the only way that anyone can learn anything is they have to persuade themselves ultimately.
Yeah.
So I try to bring the information out in each person. In other words, I try to get them in certain circumstances to make the case against themselves.
I think you get people to ask themselves good questions,
Yeah,
and that is the best thing to do.
Right.
Because when you sincerely then are asking yourself questions, then, I don't need to talk to you anymore because there's a whole dialogue going on inside my head.
That's right.
Everything I hear, I think Brad's talked about it before, you kind of put those glasses on or change your point of view, and then what comes at you comes through a different filter.
Right.
And you see things that you didn't see before.
Yes. And it's uncanny how obvious things are after you go through this versus before. How did I not see that?
How did I ever see it that way?
Yeah.
So.
All right. So I'm going to move on so we can start wrapping up here because we are coming up on the 90-minute mark, by the way. African proverb for you.
Okay.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
A speaker of truth has no friends. I just threw that in there because I don't think that's absolutely true, but I think it just goes to show that you do lose some friends.
Wow, I like that one. Write that down for me.
Okay, and then I hopefully a little lighter note here. I want to go through from Lou Rockwell. In a new autobiography, and again, new, I don't know how old this quote is, so I can't say necessarily new, but ex-German Chancellor Helmut Schmidt, at this point apparently was 96 years old, again, I don't know how old this is, who smokes 40 menthol cigarettes a day, reveals he stockpiled 38,000 of them in fear of an EU ban. Regulations are for thee, not for me.
Oh, wow. Right. I'm going to ban them.
But first, stockpile them.
Stockpile them first.
Yeah. Anyway, one of the things we try to accomplish on this show is we try to persuade your mind rather than change your behavior. The state can change your behavior. They just penalize the crap out of you, punish you for certain behaviors, and slowly you learn, not to do that. But they have not persuaded your mind, right? This is a much taller order. And I'm saying this because I'm hoping anyone who has interest in this, who's thinking, be patient. Your mind can be a much larger, and obstacle's not the right word, but it's more difficult to overcome this than to just forcing you to do something. That's the tool of the state, force. That's specifically not what we advocate here. We advocate the opposite.
And I want to talk about it more because I'm getting ready to do the show on education that we've been saying forever we're going to do. But talking about education and our so-called education system and how it kind of was designed that way, that we don't realize how much we've been taught that may not actually be correct and what the purposes of that are. So that'll be a good thing to talk about more in depth.
Absolutely. We'll iron that schedule out for the show. I don't know what your availability is, so we'll get that figured out. What I'd like to do for the next show is go back to a question that we did a show on before, but I'd like to do it again. What is libertarianism? So for anyone who's joined us more recently, I think I'd like to have a little broader overview. Again, I cannot speak. If you'd like to join me, I'd love to have you, but that's subject to your schedule. So next week
the basics.
We're going to do that. But before we go, I just have a couple things. I want to do another quote. This one's from Hans Hermann Hoppe, another one I like.
Hoppe.
It is, if the right to vote, this is kind of for those of you who exist in a different paradigm than I am now, that voting is the way to do it. If the right to vote were extended to 7-year-olds, its policies would most definitely reflect the quote-unquote legitimate concerns of children to have adequate and equal access to free French fries, lemonade, and videos.
Yeah, right. I would say my 7-year-old would be, right there.
Right. So this whole notion that, we have to have legitimate access and we're adults, so It's like, okay, just shift things. It sounds absurd when we apply it to 7-year-olds. Well, what's really the difference?
Yeah, okay, what do I want? So I'm going to force everybody to give it to me.
Exactly.
That's pretty much it.
And French fries might be on my list, by the way.
Oh, Cass says about what is libertarianism. She says little L, not big L, right?
Yes.
Yes, of course.
Yes, and we'll
And
explain that.
Capital L libertarianism is generally political party. We were talking about something different, but yeah.
Yes. So, all right, is there anything you'd like to add, or I'm going to wind this up?
You should not let me talk anymore.
No.
You should shut me up.
You did a fantastic job. I love having you on the show always.
Well, thanks for having me on this Come As You Are show.
It was fun.
Yeah.
Actually, I think we were all over the map. But,
right?
But
as usual?
Yes, as usual. It doesn't even matter if we have a confined topic. We're still
You're right.
over the map.
We're just as all over the map, so it doesn't
Yes.
matter.
So, but it's fun to have it free flowing. I always like to say, hey, please tell your friends, heck, even tell your enemies about the show. Have them listen. That would be great. We're always happy to have more listeners.
Yes.
And then we hope we provoked you to think a little bit about some of the topics and really more about the broader philosophy that underpins all this. I think that's actually more important because that gets you there. Tanya has a little different take on it. She likes to learn some of the things hands-on, the detail stuff, and work her way both ways, I guess. So
yeah, that's my husband's influence. I think he always kind of holds my feet to the fire on the, what are you going to do about it?
There you go. And if you have comments, you have further questions, remember the Annoying Peasant Radio Facebook page. We always welcome you to make comments or put questions on there. If you have show topic ideas, anything, throw it out there. Start the discussion. With that, I don't think I have anything else.
And thanks to everyone in the chat. My computer died, so I can't say that to you in the chat, but we appreciate you.
So I guess with that, again, that is very good. Thanks, everybody, for joining us in the chat. We love to have you with us. With that, we're going to leave you with Mac DeMarco and call it a show. So thanks again. This has been the Annoying Peasant Radio Show.